Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another social emotional workshop. Today we have Lisa Kaplan from Henry Ford Health, and we're going to be talking about anger management today. So, Lisa, welcome back. We're so glad to have you. I'm going to open up my screen and pull the PowerPoint up, and you can get started.
So I called this presentation, I'm so angry, I could just scream. Okay. So the next slide. Tony, are you able to advance the next slide?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So what is anger? As a noun, it's a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. And as a verb, fill someone with a feeling or provoke anger in. So did you know that most anger management problems stem from feelings of powerlessness? So think about that. When you're feeling powerless over a situation, aren't you more likely to feel angry? But the truth is, we're never just angry. There's always a feeling behind the anger. It could be fear, frustration, guilt, disappointment, shame, worry, jealousy, anxiety, hurt, sadness. So any of those feelings or multiple feelings can often be the feelings behind our anger. So one thing we want to recognize is that just because I would feel frustrated does not mean that you would feel frustrated. Maybe you're hurt, maybe you're embarrassed. So one thing we need to understand about anger management is that everybody has different life experiences. So we're going to respond differently for different reasons. So you don't want to assume that the way you feel or the feeling behind your anger is true of everyone. And the next slide. So I'm sure that you would agree with me that any person who's experienced negative consequences needs to learn anger management skills. And that doesn't matter if it's a child, if it's an adult, if it's a teacher even. So let's talk about negative consequences of anger. What bad things can happen because of anger? Okay, so we could hurt the people we love or scare the people we love. Hurt ourselves. We all know people who have gotten angry and punched a wall and hurt themselves. People can get arrested. They can go to jail or prison. Have you ever done anything out of anger and after you calm down, you say, oops, probably shouldn't have done that. So the embarrassment, the shame, people get fired from jobs because of acting out with anger on the job. It can strain relationships with anyone in your life, especially family. So your spouse, your children, parents, siblings, partners. And did you know that anger can cause health problems? And that could mean high blood pressure, which could lead to heart attack or strokes, ulcers, headaches. So not handling your anger well is pretty dangerous to a person's health. And people can lose friends and be kicked out of school and other public places. So how would we know by a person's behavior, not their appearance, but their behavior, that they're angry?
You guys can unmute and comment, or you can type your comment in the chat. But I was going to say they can turn red in the face.
Right. So that's appearance. So if someone turns red in the face or their nostrils flare, or you see veins popping out of their forehead or their neck, for your own protection, you need to look for those things so that you can be aware that someone is losing their composure. But that's appearance. So let's flip to the next page and talk about behaviors. So some people become physically violent, putting down or humiliating others, which is verbal only, It's not physical, but it's still anger. Child abuse. How about swearing, shouting obscenities, damaging property? How about this? I put my fist in your face and I don't say a word. Okay, intimidating others, pushing, shoving, throwing things, breaking or smashing things. And think about this. If you know anyone in your life who appears to have a chronic bad attitude, they're just mean and nasty all the time. So think about that, like going back to that page for a minute, think about that. Do you take it personally? Okay, many people do. But what you have to understand about someone who has a chronic bad attitude is that they're going to wake up in the morning feeling angry. They're going to go to the gas station and be angry at the clerk. They're going to go to the gym and be angry with people at the gym. They're going to be angry at work. They're going to come home and be angry to their family. And yet that has nothing to do with you. So there are people who have a chronic bad attitude, and typically, but not always, they're struggling with depression. So be aware that if you know of anyone in your life, don't take it personally, as hard as that may be. So anger is a normal feeling. It is okay to feel angry. Okay, it's okay to feel happy or sad, frustrated, surprised, annoyed. Any feeling is okay. Okay, but if you ask kids, is it okay to feel anger? Often what you might hear is no, because they associate feeling angry with doing something bad. So we want them to understand that all of our feelings are okay, but it's what you do with these feelings that matter. So anger lets us know that something's wrong. And if it's used correctly, it can provide us with the impetus to change something in our lives. But think about this. We as people are not going to make any changes unless we're internally motivated to do so. So are you going to lose weight because I tell you to, or because you're ready? You know, are you going to go back to school and get that degree because I say so, or because you're ready? So anybody who is internally motivated to make a change will be able to learn from this presentation how to address anger issues. And if a person is not ready, maybe they'll learn something that they can use in the future. So think about this. Destructive anger patterns are usually learned or acquired early in life. So think about your childhood. Think about your parents, your siblings. If your grandparents lived in the home, how did everybody handle anger? So just think about that for a moment. And the common answers are physically, verbally. Some people withdraw. Some people explode after holding it in for quite a long time. Others turn to alcohol or other drugs to cope. But however your family handled anger when you were growing up, understand that it is impacting you today. Okay, it is impacting you today. But sometimes experiences in childhood trigger anger today. And I'm going to give you a somewhat embarrassing story about myself to illustrate this. So when my sister and I were in middle school or high school, when we came home after school, if my mom wasn't home, we'd have to let ourselves in. So that meant finding the hidden key in the garage, put it in the lock, turning the key, and letting ourselves in. Sounds pretty simple, right? But it wasn't, because there was something wrong with the door, the lock, that never got fixed. So putting the key in the door and turning it actually hurt our hands. So just to be mean, whenever we could, we would lock the other one out. So she'd have to go through that experience. So I promise you, I'm a much nicer person today. Okay, so fast forward many years. I'm married, my husband and I get out of the car in the garage. He goes into the house, it takes me longer. I get to the door and it's locked. And I'm furious and I'm pounding on the door, yelling at him. And he opens the door and says, "What's the problem?" And I said, "You locked me out." And he said, "Oh, sorry, came in the house, locked the door. It's a habit." And then he asked, why are you overreacting? And at that moment, it clicked in my head what my sister used to do to me on purpose to be mean. Now, I never told my husband that story, not because I was hiding it from him. It's because I forgot. But at that moment, I remembered, and I was able to determine what triggered my anger. Now, we can't always do that, but my challenge to you is to try, because if we can determine what triggers our anger and address the trigger, the anger could dissipate. So if that ever happens again, where he locks me out, I am certain that I will not go to that same place in my head of anger, because I was able to identify the trigger. So parents and children can learn new skills to express anger in constructive ways. And parents and all adults, really, we have to remember that we're role models for our kids because they are watching us. And I can tell you, I remember when my daughter was 3 years old and we were in the grocery store, and she asked me why I'm so nice to everyone in the grocery store. And I thought, oh, isn't that cute? But then I realized if she's watching when I'm nice, maybe she's also watching when I'm not so nice. So I got to watch it. So parents and teachers, we have to be aware that we are role models for our kids. So when do anger problems occur? Well, when anger's out of proportion, like my door story, out of control, or violent. So have you ever heard of an anger blackout? Okay, so most people know that a blackout comes from drinking too much alcohol or using too many drugs. What happens is there's a big chunk of time that's missing from a person's memory as they function normally, but they don't remember it. So an anger blackout is the same concept. People get angry, they act out on their anger, and they may have no recollection of that. So I did not believe this was a real thing until one of my coworkers said that he didn't remember punching his sister in the eye until his family said, you did that. So it is a real thing. Now, could a person be lying? Of course they could, but understand that this is real. And did you know that some people get high when angry because it's an adrenaline rush? But we all know what comes up must come down. And what happens when a person comes down? That's when the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, the regret set in. And I'm sure that most of us know that alcohol and other drug use contribute to anger problems. You may hear on the news all the time when fights are involved, someone is often drunk or high. So that's common. Some people with anger problems were victims of trauma as children, okay, and therefore develop chronic anger, which comes out as overreactions to everyday incidents now. So let's say, for example, that Tony and I both grew up. I was bullied, she was not. Now we're adults, we work for a company, the boss is a bully. Neither of us like this. However, I'm going to respond differently than she is because I'm carrying the childhood trauma that she does not have. Okay, but sometimes others are triggered by more recent events in their lives. If you guys were all yelling at me and calling me names and swearing at me right now, I'd be angry, and that has nothing to do with my childhood. So all family members need to be aware of displaced anger. And I'm sure we're all guilty of this. Have you ever had a bad day at work and then you come home and you take it out on your family and it's not their fault? You displaced your anger. So we need to be aware of that. And anger problems occur when negative consequences result. If nothing bad happens, life goes on, and that's the end of that. But when negative consequences result, then we need to make a change. So all family members, even little kids, can learn their anger warning signs. Okay, where on their body do they feel it when they first start getting angry? So for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's still a 1 or a 2. If we wait until it's a 10, we are out of control. But when it's a 1 or a 2, then we can do something about it. So think to yourself for a moment, where in your body do you feel it when you first start getting angry? Okay, and I'm going to tell you, I feel it right in my gut. Okay, everybody has different answers. And why do we even care? Because if you can identify where it starts, then you have time to do something about it before you get to a 10. Once we get to a 10, we're so out of control that we can't rein it in. So for some people, they get a sensation of getting hot all over. So like their body temperature is rising or just hot in the face. Some people get shaky or tight muscles, muscle twitches. People feel like their heart is racing. They clench their fists and their teeth, tightness in the chest, pacing back and forth to get rid of that excess energy, a tightness or a knot in the throat, some kind of weird sensations in the back, the spine, the stomach. People get sweaty, dry mouth, tense shoulders, and crying. So think about for you, what are your warning signs? And if you really don't know, next time you get angry, pay attention. Okay, so recognize what's happening in your body so that it will give you information for the future. Now, for some people, being drunk or high is an anger warning sign, okay, because that's real common. People get a sense of adrenaline pumping. And as we talked about earlier, if you see this in someone else, veins popping out, nose flares, cheeks get red, then for your own protection, you need to be able to read those signs in someone else. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of tools for managing triggers, managing anger. They are not in any particular order. So this is important for children and adults. Okay, so different ones are for different people, but really all of us can benefit from this. So know your triggers. Okay, what sets you off? So it might be people or places or situations that provoke you. Okay, obviously, once you've identified what's provoking you, you try to avoid it. But what if you can't? So let's say it's my husband who triggers me. I live with him, can't really avoid him that easily. We need to have a game plan. Okay, so let's say, let me give you the example of my mother-in-law. Okay, a lot of people have a difficult mother-in-law. So what could I do if she triggers my anger? Well, instead of seeing her every week, I could see her every other week. Instead of seeing her for 4 hours, I could see her for 2 hours. I could bring someone along with me as a buffer to kind of help me deal with her. I could have a conversation with her about what she's doing to trigger me and ask her to try to stop. I could end the relationship altogether. So now I have plans to handle my trigger. Okay, also be aware that people who have what we call vulnerable conditions, okay, people who are hungry, lonely, tired, sick, injured, when we have or have PMS, any of those problems make us less able to cope with anything. We're not just talking about anger, but other emotions as well. So think about it. When you're hungry or you're tired or you're sick, you don't cope very well. So if you know that someone is feeling those ways, you might want to avoid the fight by distancing yourself until they feel better. Okay, so have you ever put your child or your student in a timeout? So have you ever put yourself in a timeout? And I don't mean a little chair in the corner of the room. A timeout could be you go into your bedroom and close the door. You lock yourself in the bathroom. You go outside and sit on the porch. Whatever it means, just getting away from whatever is troubling you, okay, is a timeout. And what about this one? Learning how to remove yourself from the situation respectfully. So let's say Tony and I are going at it. We're arguing, it's escalating, this could really get out of control. If I turn and walk away, what is she likely to do? She's likely to follow me because she's not done. But what if I said this, Tony, I'm going to go outside and calm myself down, and I'll talk to you about this after lunch. Okay, notice I'm going to calm myself down. Not you need to calm down, because nobody wants to hear that. And then I turn and walk away. Is she as likely to follow me? Probably not. But later, not only am I more calm, but so is she, and the conversation is likely to be more productive. Now, if I say I'm going to talk about this after lunch, I have to mean it, or she'll have a really good reason to feel angry. Okay, what about this? Use your support system. We all should have people in our lives, and our children should be able to identify who they can go to in their lives, who can be supportive of them when they need help. So whether it's a teacher, a counselor, a friend, a spouse, a partner, whoever it may be, we should all have people we can go to when we need them to deal with any issue, including anger. And really important to find healthy ways to discharge anger and calm down. Okay, so we need to teach children, and as adults, we need to utilize healthy coping mechanisms. So another tool is to identify the right time when to discuss issues. And I'm sure you would agree that's when everyone is calm. If everyone in the family is in an uproar and everybody's yelling and fighting, that is not the right time. So timing is everything. If someone's tired or hungry or sick, that might not be the right time. What about when someone's on their way out the door and they're running late? That might not be the right time. So identify the right time. And challenge your faulty beliefs. We all have them. I believe that life should be fair. If I expect life to be fair and then life is unfair, I'm going to be disappointed. So I need to challenge that belief. Okay, we all have them. Really important to do that. Another tool is to get professional help for any child or adult in the family who needs it, because professional help can help address anger issues as well as so many other problems. The longer you wait to get professional help, the worse the problems get. And what about this? Practice self-forgiveness. So as humans, we've all done things wrong. We could beat ourselves up from now until forever, but where is that going to get us? So what if we just decide, starting right now, moving forward, to do better and forgive ourselves for the past? Because we can't turn back the clock. We can't turn back the calendar. So what is the point of beating ourselves up for things we cannot change? Okay, self-forgiveness is really important because what it does is it decreases anger at ourselves, and it makes it more likely that we can forgive other people as well. Another tool is to take care of yourself. As silly as this sounds, if you're feeling well physically, you're going to be able to cope better with life, and that includes anger. So eating and sleeping well, relaxing when you need to, having fun, really important to control anger. And what do you think about using humor? I don't mean sarcasm. Sarcasm is seen as aggression. But what do you think about using humor? So I would say know your audience. It just depends. So I have two daughters. One, I can be funny. The other one, I better not be. So I know that about them and I act accordingly. But if it's someone you don't know that well, maybe a more distant friend, a neighbor, a colleague, maybe err on the side of caution and don't use humor to address anger. What about this? Has anybody ever recorded their feelings in a journal? Okay, writing down what's ruminating in your head and getting it on paper. It gets out of your head. And what's interesting about writing in a journal is that at a later time, you can read it back and maybe have a different perspective. Or writing a letter that you don't send. So you are all looking at the queen of nasty letter writing. I write great nasty letters that I don't necessarily send. I might rewrite it more appropriately and then send it. But truly what happens is I'm able to get my feelings out of me onto paper so that they're not ruminating in my head, and that really helps me. For some people, using prayer and meditation and deep breathing can help with anger. And what about this concept? Great concept to have during the campaign season, the election season, agree to disagree, which does not mean I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong. What it means is we're just going to agree to disagree and move on. Because we could argue about something until midnight, and I'm not going to change my mind, and neither are you. So what's the point? Let's just agree to disagree. And another one is to choose your battles. Does everything have to be a major big deal? Okay, usually not. So if your child doesn't make their bed perfectly, is that the end of the world? If the grass doesn't get mowed on Saturday and it waits till Sunday, is that the end of the world? So some things are really just not important. And what about this one? Really important to teach kids nowadays. We all have feet. We can walk away. If we stick around, we could get involved in an altercation. But if we walk away and get out of there, we definitely won't. So there are some very decent people sitting in prison right now wondering, why didn't I just walk away? But they didn't. They acted out on their anger and something tragic happened, and now they've lost their freedom. And they're sitting there wondering, why didn't I just walk away? It's so simple. So really important to teach our kids that. And what about this? Self-talk, talking to yourself to calm yourself down and back off from an argument. Okay, so saying things like calm down, take a deep breath, this really isn't a big deal. And then thinking about the situation, asking yourself some questions. How important is this in the grand scheme of things? Is it really worth it getting angry about? Is it worth ruining the rest of my day? Is my response appropriate? Is there anything I can do about it? Is taking action worth my time? After you ask yourself questions, you might just decide it's not worth it and let it go. So many of you have seen this poster, which didn't copy super terrific, but it's a poster of different funny faces with feelings underneath it. So children and even adults can easily say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. But there's so many more emotions than those three. So it's important for us to teach children to label their feelings so they can be more effective communicators. So if I tell you I'm frustrated, that is very different than me telling you I'm sad. It gives you more information to go on. So teaching our kids to label their feelings and recognizing that there's more than just three feelings. So let's talk about resolving conflicts. Okay, we want to teach people how to resolve conflicts assertively, not passively and not aggressively. So what does it mean to be passive? That's people who avoid saying what they think, feel, want, or believe because they're afraid to risk the consequences, or don't believe in their own rights because they don't know how to speak up for themselves. And some people believe that another person's rights are more important than their own. So in other words, people who are passive are like doormats. They get stepped on and walked over, and they don't get what they want. So what happens is people who are passive, their anger continues to build and build and build. So think about this. I'm blowing my anger, in other words, my hot air, into a balloon, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger. And what's going to happen eventually? It's going to pop. Okay. People who let their anger build up, it's going to come out in some other way, and it won't be healthy. So we don't want people to be passive. We also don't want people to be aggressive, and that's the next slide. Being aggressive means saying what you think, feel, want, or believe regardless of another person's thoughts, feelings, needs, or beliefs, in ways that deny another person's right to be treated with respect. So in other words, being mean, hurtful, using put downs, okay? So being aggressive does not heal relationships. It does not do well in dealing with relationships. So we certainly don't want to do that. So if we don't want to be passive and we don't want to be aggressive, what do we want to be? Assertive. And what does that mean? Saying what you think, feel, want, or believe with confidence in ways that don't damage another person's right to be treated with respect, in a straightforward, non-threatening, non-accusing, or judgmental way, and in ways that don't deny or minimize your own rights. So here's the problem. Some people are born assertive. Okay, life is easier for them. This is a skill they do not have to learn. But what about everybody else? How do you learn to be assertive at whatever age you are? So the answer to that is you practice, takes lots of practice, and you find people in your life who are assertive and you model yourself after them. Okay, and this is something that can be learned. With our kids who are young, we want them to grow up being assertive, because an assertive person can say no comfortably to anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, whether it's an offer to use alcohol or other drugs, somebody wanting to abuse them physically or sexually, they can stand up for themselves. So our kids need to learn that as early as possible. So we want to learn what we call iMessages. Some people call them I statements. And this is something that can be taught to children, but it's also taught in marriage counseling, in individual counseling, and it's taught to corporate executives, because this is a skill that works. So iMessages help people to communicate more respectfully. And it's when there's a conflict or a problem. We don't need help expressing ourselves when everything's going fine, but this is when it's a little bit less comfortable. Okay, so using an iMessage will help tell people how you feel. You're not labeling anyone, you're not blaming anything on anyone. So iMessages express what you are feeling and why, and you own the problem. So it starts with I. So if I start with I, it's about me. Okay, it's not about you. And iMessages need to be specific and done with care. We want to pay attention to our volume and our body language and our facial expressions, because you can say all the right things, but if your body language says the opposite, people are going to notice that. And we want to use iMessages before we get angry. Okay, it can prevent it from escalating. So asking yourself, what did I feel, that keyword feel, before I got angry? So when you formulate an iMessage, it starts with I, not you. If I said, you did this, you did that, the first thing you're going to do is get defensive. And instead of listening to me, you're going to be formulating in your mind your own defense. Okay, so by saying, I feel, I'm taking the pressure off you. So I tell what is happening and how I feel and why. Okay, so right now I'm feeling really upset because you didn't do the dishes. This is really difficult for me because whatever. Okay, I feel disappointed when you don't clean up after yourself. I'm feeling pretty concerned about the kids you're hanging out with. Okay, so you get the idea. When blank happens, I get kind of blank. I'm so disappointed right now. When I see this, I feel this because of this. So you get the idea. So what happens is when people hear these messages and they understand why a person is upset, okay, they're more willing to change. Okay, so really important to teach iMessages. And if we're going to talk about anger, we have to talk about safety. I'm sure you would agree with me, safety comes first. So we have to have boundaries about what we will and will not tolerate. So I could say to Tony, you are welcome to come over to watch the football game, but if you get angry, you have to leave. Okay, it's polite and it's respectful, and boundaries protect me. I'm not punishing her. Okay, it's to make me more comfortable. And children should be aware of consequences for not handling anger well. Okay, we absolutely want them to have consequences. We don't want them to get away with it. So for example, let's say you've got a 15-year-old son who punches the wall and puts a hole in the drywall. You could yell at him, call him names, swear at him, right? Or you could hold him accountable by having him fix the wall. Or hiring someone with his own money to fix the wall. Or hiring someone to teach him to fix the wall, because he will think twice about punching the wall if he's been held accountable for his negative behavior. So really important to do that. And we want to model appropriate anger management skills for our kids, because as we talked about, they are watching us. And think about this. Do you notice that when you're watching anything violent on TV, or a violent movie, or music with violent themes, or playing violent video games, does it increase your anger or that of your children? So if it does, you certainly want to limit your exposure to those sorts of things. If it doesn't, then you're good to go. And we absolutely want to challenge stereotypes of boys being socialized to be more aggressive, at least in public schools. Girls are getting into fights too. Okay, so we just absolutely want to make it clear that it is not okay to be aggressive, whether you're a boy or a girl. And this one will work in some families, but certainly not others. Diffusing anger by encouraging all family members to communicate respectfully with one another. So meaning, if I said to my family, new rule, if you don't want me, if I don't want you calling me names, I can't call you names. If I don't want you swearing at me, I can't swear at you. If I don't want you yelling at me, I can't yell at you. Let's all just agree to those 3 rules. And if everybody does, can you imagine how that alone is going to diffuse anger? Okay, in some families that will work. So learning to manage anger can improve all aspects of family life. And with that, does anybody have any questions or comments?
You guys can type your question in the chat, or you can just unmute and ask Lisa. Okay, since there aren't any questions or comments, then we will bring this session to a close. Thank you so much, Lisa, for providing this excellent presentation on anger management. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you all next time. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Tony.
All righty. Bye now.